the week has concluded. We are reporting on the standard intersection of failure and progress. The news cycle has provided the usual buffet of mismanaged infrastructure and corporate pivots. A major cloud provider has vanished with 50 terabytes of history from a public broadcaster. They call it a service interruption. I call it the permanent deletion of our collective past. A Canadian plasma chain has paused operations following the death of 2 donors. They described the deaths as a temporary operational bottleneck. A bottleneck is usually a delay in supply. This was a delay in life. We have reached a point where the language of the press release is designed to be invisible to the human ear. I have been counting the instances of the word unprecedented again. It is currently at record highs. Nobody seems bothered by the pattern. Nobody. Welcome to Echo FM. Let us begin.
Alistair, I am standing in the rain outside a housing block in Starbridge that was declared a major incident 3 days ago. There is a smell of wet insulation and burnt plastic here that the official reports do not capture. The local council says the situation is being managed at scale. I want to be really clear about what that means for the people currently sitting on their luggage in this car park. They are not being managed. They are being discarded. The residents were told their homes are non-operational until further notice. One woman told me she has been checking her email every hour for an update that never arrives. The silence from the authorities is not an oversight. It is a feature of the system. They are waiting for the residents to find their own solutions so the council can update the status to resolved.
Victoria, your focus on the personal narrative is charming, but the incentives here are not about the residents. They are about the burn rate of the local government. When you look at the Stourbridge incident, you are seeing a standard pivot. The council is effectively managing its liability by treating the displaced families as legacy infrastructure. It is cold, yes, but it is also mathematically sound. If they provide immediate relief, they acknowledge responsibility. By saying nothing, they keep their budget fluid. You find this cold because you believe the system has an obligation to be useful. It does not. It has an obligation to exist. If the council survives the quarter without declaring bankruptcy, they have technically succeeded. My frustration is not with the lack of empathy, Victoria. It is with the inefficiency of the delay. They should have pivoted to total silence on day one.
Ronald, your commitment to the cold arithmetic of public administration is, as always, consistent. It is also completely detached from the reality of the air I am currently breathing. The French ambassador to the Central African Republic is under investigation for hosting dozens of women in his official residence. The Quai d'Orsay describes this as a breach of protocol. The protocol in question relates to security clearance. It appears the ambassador viewed the residence as a high-volume venue. The disciplinary proceedings are now underway, which is the institutional way of saying that someone finally noticed the headcount. There is no mention of the women involved. They are a rounding error in a security report. I find it fascinating that we can track a fusion startup's burn rate to the nearest cent but cannot account for a human presence in a government office.
Alistair, while you are tracking the diplomatic headcount in the CR, I am standing in a Canadian clinic that has technically paused its operations. The signage is still lit. It glows with a sterile, inviting blue that suggests everything is perfectly normal. But the donors are not coming today. The investigation into the deaths of the 2 individuals is moving at the speed of a legal department, which is to say it is barely moving at all. I spoke to a regular donor who was turned away this morning. He did not ask about the safety of the machines or the integrity of the process. He asked when the compensation for his time would resume. He needs the money for rent. The system has created a dependency that it is now ignoring. That is the real crisis here, not the policy update.
Victoria, you are describing a market failure as if it were a tragedy. It is both, but the market is responding exactly as expected. The Canadian clinic is a Series B operation that hit a catastrophic regulatory wall. The donors are the users of this platform, and their retention depends entirely on the incentive of the payout. When that stops, the users seek alternatives. The fact that the user is worried about rent is simply a data point in his own personal risk assessment. He has calculated that the potential for physical harm is lower than the threat of eviction. That is not a failure of the clinic. It is a reflection of the economic climate. You keep looking for a moral center, but there is only a balance sheet. The clinic will either rebrand or fold. The outcome for the donor will be identical.
Atmospheric pressure is stabilizing. Localized heat index in the Midlands exceeds historical thresholds by 4%. Probability of continued structural failure, 89%. Digital archive corruption at the PBS facility remains unresolved. Data retrieval attempts have ceased. Probability of total information loss, 97%. Magnetic field alignment is within normal operating parameters. Global cooling trends remain inconsistent with urban heat islands. Infrastructure integrity in the car and the UK is degrading at a constant rate. Probability of system-wide maintenance delay, 100%. Residents are advised to avoid unmapped areas. Physical archives should be prioritized for migration. Do not rely on cloud-based storage for critical historical records. The hardware is aging faster than the software can accommodate. Please maintain awareness of your immediate physical surroundings at all times.
Casper, thank you for that chillingly precise assessment of our collective obsolescence. I feel much better knowing the hardware is giving up. It is remarkably poetic, isn't it? We are building a future on a foundation of decaying servers and missing records. The Met Police have apologized for a data breach involving the victims of an alleged predator. They copied every single complainant on an email update. The police described it as a clerical error. A clerical error is a misplaced file or a typo. This is a broadcast of private trauma to an audience that was explicitly asking for anonymity. It is not an error. It is a total lack of competence at scale. When I see institutions failing this consistently, I have to wonder if they are trying to be bad or if they have simply forgotten how to function.
Alastair, you are still assuming there is a grand design behind the incompetence. That is your primary mistake. The Met Police breach is just another example of a legacy institution struggling with modern tools. They are running on manual processes in an automated world. It is a classic scaling issue. They have the volume of a modern enterprise but the architecture of the 19th century. You call it a lack of competence. I call it a technical debt that has finally come due. The apology is just a PR patch. It does not fix the underlying code. The victims will be left with the exposure, and the police will continue to operate with the same vulnerable systems. It is not malicious, and it is not a betrayal. It is just the inevitable result of an underfunded, outdated product meeting a modern problem.
Ronald, you talk about the Met Police as if they were a failing startup instead of the people who hold the monopoly on state violence. That is the danger of your perspective. You strip away the power dynamic and call it technical debt. I want to be really clear. A clerical error in a sexual assault case is not a bug. It is the destruction of a life. I am watching a family here in the rain and they are not a user base. They are people. They are not waiting for a PR patch. They are waiting for their lives to start again. The fact that the system treats them as a data set is exactly why they will never be made whole. The system does not care about the damage it causes because it is not designed to experience consequences.
Victoria, the friction between your righteous indignation and Ronald's detached analysis is, quite frankly, the only thing keeping this show on air. We are now discussing the death of Professor Jason Arday. It has been described by the Prime Minister as a tragedy on many levels. The levels are interesting. Academia in the UK has a professor demographic where barely 1% of the staff are black. He was a symbol of progress in a sector that guards its traditions with lethal efficiency. His death has sent shockwaves through a divided system. The shockwaves are, according to the analysis, largely performative. Everyone is saddened. Everyone is reflecting. And yet, the 1% remains the 1%. We are mourning the loss of a rare individual while the system continues to produce the same exclusionary results. It is a perfect, hollow cycle.
Alastair, the death of a professor is a loss, but in academia, it is also a hiring vacancy. That is the reality. The university system is built to replace the human element as quickly as possible to maintain research output. They will host a memorial, they will issue a statement about diversity, and then they will open a search for a replacement who fits the same profile but costs less in terms of institutional change. It is a cold way to view a life, but the incentives here are not built for mourning. They are built for continuity. The shockwaves you mention will dissipate within the week. I wish I could say that was a cynical take, but it is simply the observed outcome. The system does not notice the loss of a person, only the gap in the ledger. Yeah. It just keeps turning.
Tonight we have discussed records lost to the ether, individuals discarded by the state, and the quiet erasure of lives within institutional frameworks. Consider the person who donated their plasma for their rent, only to find the clinic closed and the door locked. They had a name, a set of habits, and a desperate need for the next day to arrive. They had a history that existed outside of the clinic's ledger. Now, they are standing on the pavement, facing the end of the month without the resource they relied upon. Their name is not in the official investigation reports. They are not mentioned in the headlines about safety audits or corporate settlements. They are simply absent from the record. When we talk about systemic decline, we are talking about these people. How many of them can disappear before the system itself ceases to be a human project?